My wife's entire office knew my wife was cheating on me with her boss. At her company party, when I confronted them, they told me to be mature and just accept they're soulmates. My wife's co-workers even said, "Don't be selfish. They're happy together." I just smiled and said, "You're right. I should be happy for them." I got up to leave and handed an envelope to my wife and her boss. Minutes later, she was screaming and begging me to come back as she stared at what was inside. So here's the thing about being a compliance manager. You spend your entire day reading the fine print, spotting loopholes, making sure nobody gets screwed over by some clause buried on page 47 of a contract that nobody else bothered to read. I'm the guy who catches the errors before they become lawsuits. I'm the human safety net. I'm supposed to be the smartest guy in the room when it comes to seeing trouble before it hits. Which makes what happened to me absolutely, cosmically hilarious in the worst possible way. My name's Marcus Hale, I'm 36 years old, and I somehow managed to miss the biggest red flag in my life waving directly in front of my face for months. Maybe years. Honestly, I'm still doing the math on that one. And let me tell you, the numbers aren't looking good for my reputation as someone who pays attention to details. Let me paint you a picture of my life before everything went sideways. Still work, actually, for a mid-sized software company called Innovatech Solutions. Yeah, I know. The name sounds like it was generated by an AI that was fed nothing but corporate buzzwords and LinkedIn profiles. She was a marketing wizard, the kind of person who could sell ice to Eskimos and then convince them they needed the premium package with extra ice. To me, she was everything. Smart, funny in that sharp-witted way that keeps you on your toes, ambitious enough to make me want to be better. And, let's be real here, so far out of my league that I still couldn't believe she said yes when I proposed. I'm not fishing for compliments here. I'm just stating facts. Harper was a solid 9 who could hit 10 with the right lighting, and I'm a generous 6.5 on my best day after a haircut and when I'm wearing pants that actually fit. We were the power couple that made our friends simultaneously jealous and nauseous. You know the type. The couple that posts coordinated vacation photos, finishes each other's sentences at brunch, and makes other people want to gag on their overpriced avocado toast and kale smoothies. Everyone said we were perfect together. Her friends said it. My friends said it. Hell, even my mother said it. And that woman hasn't approved of a single decision I've made since I was 7 and chose chocolate milk over regular milk. We had the nice condo in a decent neighborhood, the 2-car garage, the matching coffee mugs with our initials that Harper bought from some boutique store that charged $40 for pottery. I'd nod along, genuinely happy that she was happy, thrilled that she was finally getting the recognition she deserved. I'd ask questions, show interest, be the supportive husband. And the whole time, I was apparently the only person in the greater metropolitan area who didn't know that getting her vision meant something entirely different than I thought it did. The thing about hindsight is that it's not just 2020. It's high definition, surround sound, IMAX-level clarity that makes you want to go back in time and slap yourself across the face. Hard. Repeatedly. Maybe with a frozen fish for good measure. Because once you see it, once you really see it, you can't unsee it. And every memory, every conversation, every little moment that seemed perfectly normal at the time suddenly transforms into evidence of just how spectacularly blind you were. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the story of how I went from being Marcus Hale, the happily married compliance manager with the perfect life, to Marcus Hale, the guy who learned that sometimes the biggest compliance violation is trusting people to actually have a shred of basic human decency. Spoiler alert, they don't. But hey, at least I got a hell of a story out of it, right? If you've ever worked in corporate America, you know there's always that one person who seems to have drunk some kind of special Kool-Aid that makes everyone else think they're God's gift to the quarterly earnings report. At Lexera Systems, that person was my wife. Harper had this almost supernatural ability to make people care about things they absolutely should not care about. I'm talking about getting grown adults genuinely excited about a software update that basically just changed the color of a button from blue to slightly different blue. She could walk into a conference room full of dead-eyed developers who hadn't seen sunlight in 3 days, and suddenly they're nodding along like she just revealed the secrets of the universe instead of explaining why the new ad campaign features a thumbs-up emoji instead of a regular hand. It was kind of amazing to watch, honestly. Harper had charisma in the way that cult leaders and really successful used car salesmen have charisma. She'd stand at the front of a room with her laser pointer and her perfectly practiced hand gestures, and somehow she'd make a PowerPoint presentation about cloud-based data integration feel like a TED Talk that was going to change your life. People would leave those meetings pumped up, ready to conquer the world, convinced that yes, their customer relationship management software was going to revolutionize the industry. Never mind that there were like 40 other companies doing the exact same thing with the exact same features. Harper made you believe that Lexera was different, that they were special, that they were going to be the next big thing. And her boss, Gregory Maddox, CEO, founder, and apparently the tech world's answer to a middle-aged man going through a very expensive midlife crisis, absolutely ate it up. Gregory was one of those guys who probably watched The Social Network a few too many times and decided he was the next Mark Zuckerberg, except with worse hair and a personality that made you want to fake a phone call just to escape a conversation with him. He was in his early 50s but dressed like he was still in his 20s, always wearing those stupid expensive sneakers that cost more than my car payment and fitted t-shirts that were clearly trying to show off whatever sad results he was getting from his twice-weekly sessions with a personal trainer who was absolutely robbing him blind. But Gregory loved Harper. And I don't mean in the way a boss appreciates a good employee, though at the time, that's what I thought it was. I mean he worshipped her like she was some kind of marketing prophet who had descended from the heavens to bless his mediocre software company with her divine presence. He started quoting her in meetings. Actual quotes. Like she was Maya Angelou or something. As Harper says, it's about vision, not versions. What does that even mean? Nothing. It means absolutely nothing. But Gregory would say it with this reverent tone, and all the other executives would nod sagely like he'd just dropped some profound wisdom instead of a string of buzzwords that Harper probably came up with while sitting on the toilet. Harper would come home and tell me about these meetings, about how Gregory really understood her ideas, about how he was giving her more responsibility, putting her in charge of bigger campaigns, trusting her with the company's vision. And I'd be sitting there on our couch, the one I assembled from IKEA with nothing but determination, Swedish instructions that might as well have been hieroglyphics, and 3 Allen wrenches that all looked identical. Genuinely happy for her. Proud of her. My wife was killing it at work, moving up in the world, finally getting the recognition she deserved after years of working for bosses who didn't appreciate her talent. What kind of husband would I be if I wasn't supportive? What kind of partner would I be if I didn't celebrate her success? So I celebrated. I took her out to nice dinners when she got promoted to senior marketing director. I bought champagne when she landed that big client account. I listened to her talk about Gregory's vision for the company and how she was going to help him achieve it, and I nodded along like a good supportive husband should. I was her biggest cheerleader, her #1 fan, the guy in the audience with the foam finger and the face paint. Go Harper. Rah rah rah. Look at my wife being successful and amazing. What an idiot. But here's the thing that should have tipped me off, the red flag that was so obvious in retrospect that I want to build a time machine just so I can go back and shake myself until my teeth rattle. Harper stopped laughing at my jokes. Now, I know what you're thinking. Marcus, maybe your jokes just aren't funny. And okay, fair point. I'm not exactly Kevin Hart over here. But Harper always laughed at my jokes. Even the bad ones. Especially the bad ones. That was kind of our thing. I'd make some terrible dad joke. And yes, I know they're called dad jokes even though we didn't have kids yet. That's not the point. And she'd groan and laugh at the same time. That specific laugh that says, I can't believe I married someone who thinks this is comedy, but in an affectionate way. Like, I'd hit her with classics. Why did the lawyer wear a neck brace? Because he lost his appeal. She'd laugh. What do you call a fake noodle? An impasta. She'd laugh. I used to hate facial hair, but then it grew on me. She'd laugh and throw a pillow at me, which I counted as a win. These are objectively terrible jokes. I know they're terrible. That's what makes them funny. That's the whole point of dad jokes. They're so bad that they loop back around to being endearing. But somewhere around the 6-month mark before everything exploded, Harper stopped laughing. I'd deliver my A material, my greatest hits, the jokes that had been killing for years, and she'd just look at me with this blank expression. Not annoyed, not irritated, just nothing. Like I was speaking a language she didn't understand anymore. Like I was a stranger making awkward small talk in an elevator instead of her husband trying to make her smile after a long day. I'd try new material. I'd recycle old favorites. I'd even stoop to looking up jokes on Reddit, which, let me tell you, is a new low for a man in his 30s. Nothing worked. The well had dried up. Harper would just say, "That's nice, Marcus," in this distracted tone and go back to scrolling through her phone, probably looking at work emails or Slack messages or whatever it was that was so much more important than her husband's attempt to connect with her through the time-honored tradition of terrible wordplay. That should have been my first real clue that something was wrong. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field, doesn't at least get a pity laugh from your wife of 5 years. Something has fundamentally shifted in your relationship. That's not just a comedy drought. That's a sign that the person you married has mentally checked out of the marriage and is probably checking into something or someone else. But did I see it? Did I recognize this massive waving red flag for what it was? Of course not. I just figured maybe Harper was stressed from work. Maybe she had a lot on her plate. Maybe she was tired of my jokes after hearing variations of the same 20 dad jokes for half a decade. Maybe I needed to work on my delivery. I made excuses. I rationalized. I did what people in denial do best. I convinced myself that everything was fine even as the evidence mounted that everything was very much not fine. You know how in every crime documentary there's always that moment where the detective looks at the camera and says, "The signs were all there. We just didn't see them." Yeah, well, I was living in my own personal true crime episode, except the crime was against my dignity and the detective was me, except I had apparently taken a sabbatical from having any functioning brain cells. Looking back now, the signs weren't just there. They were doing a full Broadway musical production complete with jazz hands and a chorus line. But at the time I was apparently auditioning for the role of world's most oblivious husband and absolutely nailing it. It started with the phone. Harper's phone became like a third entity in our marriage, except this entity got more attention than I did and didn't have to do the dishes. The thing started buzzing at the most ridiculous hours. I'm talking midnight, 1 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning. We'd be in bed. I'd be drifting off to sleep after watching whatever crime documentary was trending on Netflix, because apparently I enjoy watching other people's lives fall apart as preparation for my own. And suddenly her phone would light up like a Christmas tree on steroids. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Ping, ping, ping. It was like sleeping next to a beehive that had been hooked up to the electrical grid. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. The second time, I figured maybe there was some kind of emergency at work. By the 15th time, I started asking questions like a normal human being who doesn't enjoy being woken up at ungodly hours by notification sounds. "Hey babe, everything okay?" That's a lot of late-night messages. Harper didn't even look up from her screen, just kept typing away with her thumbs moving faster than I thought humanly possible. "It's just work stuff," she said in that casual tone that people use when they're lying, but haven't practiced the lie enough to make it sound convincing. "Clients in Europe. Time zones, you know." Right. Europe. That magical land where apparently business cannot function without sending my wife text messages at 2 in the morning. Never mind that most of Lexra's clients were actually based in North America. Never mind that Harper worked in marketing, not customer support. So there was literally no reason she'd need to be responding to client emergencies in the middle of the night. Never mind that she was grinning at her phone like she'd just won the lottery instead of dealing with some urgent work crisis. Nope, it was definitely just professional correspondence about quarterly projections and brand synergy or whatever corporate nonsense she wanted to sell me. And because I'm apparently the most trusting idiot this side of the Mississippi, I believed her. "Oh yeah, Europe, time zones, that makes sense," I said, rolling back over and trying to fall asleep while her phone continued its impression of a slot machine hitting jackpot. I even felt bad for her, having to deal with demanding international clients at all hours. What a supportive husband I was, understanding about her work-life balance issues. Give me a gold star and a dunce cap, because I earned both. Then there was the vocabulary shift. Harper started talking like she'd been possessed by the ghost of a Silicon Valley venture capitalist. Everything became about pivoting and disrupting and leveraging synergies. We'd be sitting at dinner. Actual dinner at our actual dinner table that we'd picked out together at a furniture store where we'd spent 3 hours debating the merits of oak versus maple. And she'd hit me with corporate buzzword salad that would make a McKinsey consultant tell her to calm down. Marcus, I think we need to pivot our approach to household management, she said one night while I was trying to enjoy my chicken parmesan. I looked up from my plate, confused, because last time I checked we were married humans, not a startup company looking for series of funding. Pivot what exactly? I asked, thinking maybe she wanted to rearrange the furniture or something. Our dynamic, she said, using her fork to gesture in a way that I think was supposed to look thoughtful, but mostly just made her look like she was conducting an invisible orchestra. We need to be more agile in our decision-making processes. Agile. In our marriage. She wanted our marriage to be agile. I just wanted to eat my chicken without feeling like I was in a board meeting. Harper, are you talking about the dishes? Because if you want me to load the dishwasher differently, you can just say that. You don't need to pivot anything. She gave me this look, this disappointed look like I was a slow student who wasn't grasping the material. You're not understanding the broader vision here, she said, and I swear to God she actually used the phrase broader vision while discussing household chores. That should have been a clue. Normal people don't talk like that unless they've been spending way too much time with someone who talks like that. It's like linguistic osmosis. You start picking up the speech patterns of the people you spend the most time with. And Harper was clearly spending a lot of time with someone who thought corporate jargon was an acceptable substitute for human language. Someone like, oh, I don't know. Maybe her boss Gregory, who probably said things like, let's take this offline, when he meant, let's stop talking about this, and circle back, when he meant, I'm going to forget about this immediately. But did I connect those dots? Did I think, my wife is starting to sound exactly like her boss. Maybe something weird is going on there. Nope. I just figured Harper was really committed to her job, really invested in corporate culture, really drinking the Lexera Kool-Aid. I told myself that this was just what ambitious people did. They immersed themselves fully in their work environment. It was dedication. It was professionalism. It was definitely not a sign that she was spending so much time with Gregory that she was starting to adopt his entire personality like some kind of corporate pod person. The late-night work sessions started ramping up too. Harper would come home at 9, 10, sometimes 11 at night, apologizing for missing dinner, but explaining that they were in the middle of a critical campaign launch or an important strategy session or some other vaguely defined work emergency that absolutely could not wait until normal business hours. We just lost track of time, she'd say, grabbing leftovers from the fridge. You know how it is when you're in the zone. Sure, I knew how it was. I'd had my share of long days at the office, closing out contracts and dealing with compliance issues that needed immediate attention. But here's the thing. I worked in compliance. My job was literally built on deadlines and regulations and making sure things were done by the book. And even I managed to make it home for dinner most nights. Harper worked in marketing. Marketing, the department that comes up with catchy slogans and designs email campaigns. I'm not saying it's not important work, but I am saying it's not exactly emergency room surgery. There's no reason you need to be at the office until 11 at night working on a social media strategy. But again, trusting idiot over here just nodded along. Yeah, babe, I understand. Work is crazy right now. Do what you need to do. I'd heat up her dinner, ask about her day, listen to her talk about whatever campaign she was working on while thinking what a great husband I was for being so understanding about her demanding schedule. Meanwhile, she was probably working on a different kind of campaign, the How to Destroy Your Marriage While Your Husband Smiles and Nods campaign. The worst part? Her coworkers started acting weird around me too. We'd run into people from Lexera at the grocery store or at the coffee shop near her office, and they'd get this look on their faces. You know the look, that uncomfortable, slightly pitying expression that people get when they know something you don't, and they're not sure whether telling you would be doing you a favor or just making everything worse. They'd make awkward small talk, ask how I was doing in this overly concerned tone like I'd just been diagnosed with something terminal, and then find an excuse to leave as quickly as possible. I thought they were just weird. Turns out they were just aware of reality, which is more than I could say for myself at the time. Here's something I learned the hard way. When an entire office full of supposedly intelligent, college-educated adults starts treating their CEO like he's some kind of messianic figure who descended from the heavens to bless them with the gift of customer relationship management software, you should probably start asking questions. Big questions. Questions like, is this a company or a cult? And should I be concerned that my wife works here? But hindsight is 2020, and at the time, I just thought Lexera Systems had really good employee engagement. Shows you what I know about red flags. Apparently, I need them to literally hit me in the face before I notice them. Gregory Maddox wasn't just Harper's boss. He was Lexera's founder, CEO, and apparently the office's answer to a tech bro messiah. The guy had this hold over his employees that was somewhere between inspiring leadership and straight-up mind control. I'm talking about grown adults, people with mortgages and car payments and college degrees, quoting this man like he was Benjamin Franklin mixed with Steve Jobs mixed with whatever guru you follow on Instagram for inspirational quotes. Every time I had to attend one of Harper's company events, which thankfully wasn't often because I valued my sanity, I'd hear employees dropping Gregory's name like he was Beyoncé. Gregory says that innovation isn't about being first, it's about being right. Okay, cool, but isn't that just common sense dressed up in a blazer and a TED Talk voice? Gregory believes that the best ideas come from collaboration, not competition. Yeah, so does every corporate teamwork poster ever made. Gregory thinks we should disrupt the industry by staying true to our core values. What does that even mean? That's not disruption. That's just existing while using fancy words. But the employees ate it up. They would nod solemnly when his name was mentioned, like someone had just quoted scripture at a Sunday service. I once overheard someone, a senior developer who probably made six figures, say with a completely straight face, if Gregory left tech, he could lead a country. A country. Like we're talking about George Washington or something, not a 52-year-old man who made his fortune selling software that helps companies track customer emails more efficiently. Don't get me wrong, that's a perfectly respectable achievement. But leading a country? The man wore sneakers that cost $800 and probably couldn't tell you who his own state senators were. The only thing Gregory should be leading is maybe a hiking trip, and even then I'd want to see his credentials first. The hero worship was insane, but what made it worse was how Harper fed into it. She wasn't just drinking the Kool-Aid. She was the one mixing it, serving it, and asking if anyone wanted seconds. Every conversation we had somehow circled back to Gregory and his wisdom. We'd be watching TV and a commercial would come on, and Harper would say something like, "You know, Gregory has this theory about advertising in the digital age." I'd be brushing my teeth, and she'd poke her head into the bathroom to tell me about Gregory's thoughts on morning routines and productivity. The man had infiltrated every aspect of our lives without even being physically present, which in retrospect should have been another massive red flag. But again, I was apparently auditioning for the role of most clueless husband in human history. What really got me, what should have shaken me awake from my denial coma, was the way Harper's voice changed when she talked about him. You know how people get this specific tone when they're talking about someone they admire? It's softer, more animated, with this underlying current of genuine affection and respect. That's fine when you're talking about, say, your grandmother or your favorite teacher from high school. It's significantly less fine when you're talking about your boss and you're a married woman. But Harper would light up like a Christmas tree whenever Gregory's name entered the conversation. Gregory thinks I have real potential to lead the entire marketing division. She'd say with this glow in her eyes that I don't think I'd seen since our wedding day. He says I understand the vision better than anyone else on the team. And stupid, trusting me would just smile and say, "That's great, honey. He's lucky to have you." Yeah, he was lucky all right. Lucky that I was too dense to realize that understanding the vision was apparently code for something significantly less professional. The thing is, Harper never looked at me that way. Not anymore, anyway. Maybe she did in the early days of our relationship, back when we were still in that honeymoon phase where everything your partner does is fascinating and endearing. But somewhere along the line, and I'm realizing now it was probably around the time Gregory promoted her to senior marketing director, that spark in her eyes when she looked at me just kind of disappeared. I became furniture. Reliable, functional furniture that paid half the mortgage and assembled IKEA products without complaining too much, but furniture nonetheless. Meanwhile, Gregory got the spark. Gregory got the dreamy voice. Gregory got the rapt attention and the genuine enthusiasm. I'd be sitting across from Harper at dinner trying to tell her about something interesting that happened at work, and she'd be scrolling through her phone, half listening, throwing out the occasional hum to pretend she was engaged. But mention Gregory's name? Suddenly, I had her full attention. Suddenly, she was present, engaged, ready to discuss at length whatever profound wisdom the great Gregory had bestowed upon the world that day. I started to notice a pattern. Harper would come home from work, and the first thing she'd want to talk about, before asking about my day, before discussing what we were doing for dinner, before anything, was something Gregory said or did. Gregory gave the most amazing presentation today about market positioning. Gregory brought in lunch for the whole team. Isn't that thoughtful? Gregory told the funniest story in our strategy meeting. Gregory. The man's name came up more in my marriage than my own name did. And here's the kicker. I never looked at her that way when I talked about my boss. You know why? Because my boss, Linda, was a perfectly competent 55-year-old woman who wore sensible pantsuits and talked about her grandkids during lunch breaks. I respected Linda. I appreciated Linda's management style. But I didn't go home to my wife and wax poetic about Linda's vision for the compliance department or Linda's inspiring thoughts on risk management. Because that would be weird. That would be the behavior of someone who had feelings beyond professional respect for their superior. But I rationalized it. Of course I did. I told myself that Harper was just really passionate about her work, that she was invested in her career, that it was good that she had a boss who recognized her talents and pushed her to excel. I told myself that this was what ambition looked like, what dedication looked like. I told myself that I was being supportive by encouraging her relationship with her mentor. Mentor. That's what I called him. Her mentor. Like they were in some kind of wholesome professional development program and not whatever the hell was actually going on. Looking back, I realized I wasn't her husband anymore. I was her pizza guy. You know what I mean. That person you're always happy to see because they bring you something you want, but you don't actually care about them as a human being. You don't ask your pizza delivery guy about his hopes and dreams. You don't look into his eyes and feel a connection. You just take the pizza, maybe leave a tip if you're feeling generous, and close the door. That was me. I was the guy who showed up reliably, provided what was needed, and then got dismissed so Harper could get back to whatever was actually important to her. Which, spoiler alert, was not me. There comes a moment in every man's life when he has to make a choice. You can keep living in denial, pretending everything is fine while the world burns around you. Or you can face reality head-on and deal with whatever nightmare awaits you. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday afternoon when I was supposed to be leaving for a 3-day business trip to Atlanta for some mind-numbing compliance conference. I was packing my suitcase, folding underwear and rolling up ties like a responsible adult, when this thought just slammed into my brain like a freight train made of pure anxiety. What if I'm wrong about everything? Now, normally I'm not a paranoid guy. I don't check Harper's phone while she's sleeping. I don't hire private investigators or install tracking apps or do any of that psycho behavior you see in bad Lifetime movies. But something about the way she'd been acting lately, the late nights, the constant phone checking, the way she'd started spraying on extra perfume before late meetings, it all added up to a picture I really didn't want to see but couldn't ignore anymore. My gut was screaming at me that something was wrong. And I've learned over the years that when your gut screams, you should probably listen to it instead of telling it to shut up and stop being dramatic. So I did something that would either prove I was a crazy, paranoid husband who needed therapy or confirm that my worst suspicions were correct. I set up a camera. A tiny little nanny cam that I'd actually bought years ago when we were thinking about getting a dog and wanted to make sure it didn't destroy the apartment while we were at work. We never got the dog. Harper decided she was too busy with her career, but I kept the camera in my office drawer, still in its original packaging. It was one of those discreet ones that looks like a phone charger, the kind that people use to catch their babysitters stealing or their teenagers throwing parties. I never thought I'd be using it to catch my wife doing whatever it was she was doing. I set it up in the living room, angled toward the couch. Yeah, that couch. The one I'd spent 4 hours assembling from IKEA while Harper supervised and drank wine and occasionally handed me the wrong screws just to keep things interesting. That stupid couch that had been the site of so many movie nights and lazy Sundays and normal married couple activities. I positioned the camera on the bookshelf, hidden behind a picture frame of us from our honeymoon in Greece. The irony wasn't lost on me. Using a photo of our happiest moment to potentially document our worst. Before I left for the airport, I tested the camera to make sure it was working. Live feed straight to my phone. Crystal clear video, decent audio, motion-activated recording. It felt insane, like I was living in some kind of spy thriller except instead of international espionage, it was just domestic sadness. Part of me hoped, genuinely hoped, that I'd check the footage later and see nothing. Just an empty apartment. Maybe Harper coming home late, eating dinner alone, watching TV, going to bed. That would be fine. That would be great, actually. I could delete the footage, throw away the camera, and maybe book us a couples therapy session to work on my trust issues. The conference in Atlanta was brutal. I sat through presentation after presentation about regulatory compliance and risk management frameworks, and I absorbed exactly 0% of the information because my brain was stuck in a loop of worst-case scenarios. Every time I checked my phone, which was roughly every 7 minutes, I'd see notifications that motion had been detected in my apartment. But I couldn't bring myself to look. Not in the middle of a conference room full of compliance officers from across the country. Not while I was supposed to be networking and learning about the latest updates to data privacy regulations. So I just sat there, phone burning a hole in my pocket, smile frozen on my face, nodding at appropriate moments while my marriage potentially imploded in high definition on a server somewhere. It wasn't until the second night, alone in my depressing hotel room with its scratchy sheets and weirdly aggressive air conditioning, that I finally worked up the courage to check the footage. I ordered room service, a burger that cost $38 because hotels are basically legalized robbery, poured myself a whiskey from the minibar that cost almost as much as the burger, and opened the app on my phone. My hands were shaking. Actual shaking, like I was watching a horror movie and waiting for the jump scare. Except this wasn't a movie. This was my life, and I was about to find out if my wife was the villain or if I was just a paranoid asshole with too much time and not enough trust. The first clip was from around 7 p.m. the previous evening. Motion detected. I hit play, and there was Harper, walking into our apartment. Normal so far. She was carrying her work bag, still in her business casual outfit, that blue blouse I'd always liked on her. She dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her heels, checked her phone. Standard after-work routine. For a second I felt relieved, maybe even a little guilty. See, nothing suspicious. Just my wife coming home from work like a normal person. Maybe I really was losing it. Then she walked to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of wine from the rack. The expensive stuff we'd been saving for a special occasion. Apparently this qualified, and 2 glasses. 2. Not 1. 2 glasses. And the relief evaporated like water on hot pavement. She set them on the counter, checked her phone again, and then the doorbell rang. My heart stopped. I'm not being dramatic here. I genuinely felt my entire cardiovascular system just decide to take a break from functioning. I watched as Harper walked to the door with this smile on her face, the kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She opened the door, and there he was. Gregory freaking Maddox, CEO of Lexarus Systems, wearer of expensive sneakers, destroyer of marriages, standing in my doorway holding a bag of takeout like he was her boyfriend coming over for date night. I should have turned it off right there. I should have thrown my phone across the room and saved myself from whatever came next. But I didn't. I couldn't. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, horrifying, but impossible to look away from. I watched as Harper let him in. Watched as they hugged. Not a professional hug, not a friendly hug, but one of those long, intimate embraces where bodies press together and faces get buried in necks. Watched as they pulled apart, and she looked up at him with those sparkling eyes, that dreamy expression that used to be reserved for me. They moved to the living room. My living room. Sat on my couch. The couch I built. They poured the wine I bought. Started eating the takeout he brought. Looked like Thai food from that place Harper and I used to go to for anniversaries. They were laughing, talking, touching each other's arms in that casual but not casual way that people do when they're more than friends, but trying to maintain some thin veneer of deniability. And then they kissed. Not a peck. Not an accidental brush of lips. A full-on, passionate, I've been waiting all day to do this kind of kiss. The kind of kiss that makes it very clear this wasn't their first rodeo. They'd done this before. Probably many times. This was routine for them. Comfortable. Natural. Like they'd been together for years instead of, well, I guess they kind of had been, just behind my back. I sat there in that hotel room, $38 burger going cold on the desk, watching my wife make out with her boss on the couch I assembled. The couch that had required 4 hours of my life, 3 different sized Allen wrenches, and a level of patience I didn't know I possessed. The couch, where we'd watched countless movies, where we'd fallen asleep together on lazy Sunday afternoons, where we'd made plans for our future. And now Harper and Gregory were using it as their personal romantic rendezvous spot. But wait, it gets better. Because just when I thought this nightmare couldn't possibly get worse, the doorbell rang again. Harper and Gregory pulled apart, looking slightly annoyed at the interruption, which, fair, and Harper got up to answer it. And who walked in? 3 of Harper's co-workers from Lexera. 3 people I'd met at company events, who'd shaken my hand and made small talk and pretended to respect my existence. They walked in carrying more wine, snacks, cheese and crackers like this was some kind of party. And they treated it like it was normal. Like walking in on your coworker making out with the CEO on her husband's couch was just another Tuesday evening. They laughed, they poured wine, they made themselves comfortable in my living room like it was a break room at the office. One of them, Jennifer from accounting, even made a joke about it. I couldn't hear exactly what she said, but everyone laughed, and Harper playfully swatted Gregory's arm. And my brain just started short-circuiting, because what kind of office culture was this? That's when I realized I wasn't just the clueless husband. I was the office joke, the punchline, the icebreaker activity they probably laughed about during lunch breaks. Everyone knew. Everyone had known, probably for months. And they didn't just not tell me. They actively participated. They enabled it. They showed up with wine and snacks to celebrate my humiliation. I spent the rest of that conference in a fog. Not the romantic, mysterious kind of fog that makes everything look artistic and moody. More like the toxic, choking kind of fog that makes you question every decision you've ever made and wonder if breathing is even worth the effort anymore. I sat through presentations on data breach protocols and regulatory frameworks, and I'm pretty sure I could have been on fire and wouldn't have noticed. My mind was stuck on an endless loop of that footage. Harper and Gregory on my couch, her coworkers treating my humiliation like it was happy hour at Applebee's. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're down there, you've got 2 choices. You can curl up in a ball and let the world steamroll over you, or you can get angry. Really angry. The kind of angry that turns into cold, calculated planning. And me? I'm a compliance manager. Planning is literally what I do for a living. I don't just read contracts. I find the loopholes, the clauses, the fine print that everyone else misses. If there's a way to legally protect my company, I'll find it. And if there's a way to legally destroy someone who wronged me, well, same skill set, different application. The second I got back from Atlanta, I called Amira Cortez. If you've never heard of Amira Cortez, consider yourself lucky, because it means you've never needed a divorce lawyer so ruthless that she makes sharks look like therapy dogs. Amira had a reputation in legal circles, the kind of reputation that made opposing counsel seriously consider early retirement when they saw her name on the court documents. She was a partner at Cortez and Associates, a firm that specialized in high-net-worth divorces, and she had a success rate that would make a Major League Baseball player jealous. I'd actually met Amira a few years back at a legal conference. Yes, I go to legal conferences for fun. We've established that I'm boring, and we'd stayed in touch professionally. She'd given me her card, said if I ever needed anything to give her a call. At the time, I'd laughed it off. Me? Need a divorce lawyer? I was happily married. I had the perfect wife, the perfect life, the perfect future all planned out. That card had been sitting in my wallet for 3 years, getting more worn every time I opened it, and I'd never thought I'd actually use it. Funny how life works out. I called her office on a Friday afternoon. The receptionist, who sounded like she'd been trained to handle emotionally destroyed individuals calling in various states of crisis, put me through immediately when I mentioned Amira's name. 2 rings, and then I heard that voice. Amira had this way of talking that was simultaneously comforting and terrifying, like a kindergarten teacher who could also absolutely murder you and make it look like an accident. "Marcus Hale," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Let me guess, you finally realized she was cheating." I nearly dropped my phone. "How did you wait, what?" Amira laughed, not unkindly. "Marcus, I've been doing this for 20 years. I can smell a cheating spouse from 3 states away. Plus, I follow Harper on LinkedIn. Anyone who posts that many photos with their amazing boss and incredible mentor is absolutely sleeping with said boss. It's basically a neon sign. Even in my devastated state, I had to appreciate the brutal honesty. No sugarcoating, no false sympathy, just straight facts delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. We set up a meeting for Monday morning. I spent the weekend downloading every piece of video footage from that camera, organizing it into files, taking screenshots of the most damning moments. I went through our financial records, bank statements, investment accounts, basically every piece of paperwork that existed in our marriage. If Amira was going to go to war for me, I was going to give her all the ammunition she needed. Monday morning, I showed up at her office in downtown at 9 a.m. sharp. The place screamed successful lawyer who charges by the minute. All glass and steel and modern furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable in equal measure. Amira's office was on the top floor, corner suite with views of the city that probably cost more per month than my car payment. She was sitting behind a massive desk made of what looked like reclaimed wood and intimidation, wearing a power suit that could have negotiated peace treaties. "Marcus," she said, standing up to shake my hand. Amira was in her mid-40s, with perfectly styled dark hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a handshake that felt like a contract negotiation. "Sit. Tell me everything, and don't leave out any details no matter how embarrassing. I've heard worse, I promise." So I did. I told her about Harper and Gregory, about the late nights and the corporate buzzwords, and the way my wife stopped laughing at my dad jokes. I showed her the footage, all of it. Harper and Gregory making out on my couch. Her coworkers showing up like it was a viewing party. The text messages I'd managed to screenshot before Harper started being more careful with her phone. Everything. Amira watched it all with the emotional investment of someone watching paint dry, occasionally making notes on her legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A predatory smile. The kind of smile a lion probably makes right before it takes down a gazelle. "Marcus, I have good news and better news. The good news is you have a completely airtight case for divorce based on adultery. The video evidence alone would make any judge side with you. The better news is that I'm going to make your wife and her boss regret ever meeting each other." Then she asked the question that changed everything. "Did you and Harper sign a prenup or postnup?" I nodded. "Postnup. About 3 years ago." Amira's eyebrows shot up. "Really? What?" And here's where it gets good. Harper wanted to start a business. A candle company. She needed investment capital, and I agreed to put up $50,000 from my savings. But I'm not an idiot. I'm a compliance manager. I know how many small businesses fail in the first year. So I asked her to sign a postnup that protected my assets in case things went south with either the business or the marriage. Amira was practically vibrating with excitement now, which was both encouraging and slightly terrifying. "And did you include an adultery clause?" I nodded again. "Standard template. If either of us commits adultery, the other party gets everything. The condo down payment savings, joint accounts, investment portfolios, any assets acquired during the marriage." I honestly never thought it would matter. I just included it because it was in the template my lawyer recommended. "What happened to the candle company?" Amira asked. I couldn't help but laugh, even though nothing about this situation was actually funny. It failed. Spectacularly. Turns out people don't want to buy candles that smell like emotions. Harper's business model was to create candles that represented different feelings. Joy smelled like vanilla and something. Sadness was lavender and rain, whatever that means. Regret was bourbon and cedar. She made about 12 sales, all to friends and family who felt obligated. The whole thing went under in 8 months, and I lost my 50 grand. Amira was grinning now, full teeth, like a shark that just spotted a wounded seal. "So let me get this straight. You invested in her failed business. She lost your money. You made her sign a postnup to protect your remaining assets. That postnup includes an adultery clause. And now she's been caught on camera committing adultery with her boss, while her coworkers cheered them on like it's the Super Bowl. Yeah, that's pretty much the situation." "Marcus," Amira said, standing up and walking around her desk, "I'm going to be completely honest with you. In my 20 years of practice, I have never, and I mean never, seen a case this perfect. This is the legal equivalent of someone handing me a gift-wrapped victory on a silver platter. Your wife didn't just cheat on you. She documented it, invited witnesses, and violated a legal contract that gives you everything. The only way this could be better is if she'd sent you an engraved invitation to watch." She pulled out a thick file folder and started flipping through documents. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to file for divorce citing adultery, using your video evidence. Based on the postnup, you'll get the condo savings. That's what? About $80,000. 92. I corrected. Even better. You'll get the joint checking and savings accounts, any investment portfolios in both your names, and any assets acquired during the marriage. That includes any company stock options, right? My brain suddenly kicked into gear. Harper has stock options with Lexera. When she made senior director, they gave her a package that included shares. We put them in her name for tax purposes, but they were acquired during the marriage. Amira's smile got wider. Those are marital assets. You get half, possibly more, depending on how the judge feels about her behavior. I sat back in my chair, letting it all sink in. The candle company, Emotional Sense, or some ridiculous name like that, had been Harper's dream. She'd wanted to revolutionize the home fragrance industry by connecting scents to feelings. It was pretentious, impractical, and doomed from the start, but I'd supported her anyway. I'd given her my savings, signed the contracts, believed in her vision even when every business instinct I had was screaming that this was a terrible idea. Amira's plan was simple, elegant, and absolutely brutal. "You're going to their company gala," she said, like she was suggesting I pick up milk from the grocery store instead of walking into what would essentially be enemy territory. "You're going to smile, be charming, play the supportive husband, and then you're going to drop a bomb so big it'll make Hiroshima look like a firecracker. And I'm going to be there, in the audience, watching the fallout with popcorn." The Lexera Systems annual gala was in 2 weeks. It was one of those corporate events that companies throw to pretend they care about their employees while actually just celebrating how much money they made that year. Black tie optional, open bar, rubber chicken dinner, and a bunch of speeches from executives patting themselves on the back for fostering innovation and building a culture of excellence. Harper had been talking about it for months. What dress she was going to wear, how important it was for her career, how Gregory was going to announce some big company initiative, and she was part of the team that developed it. She'd asked me weeks ago if I wanted to come as her plus one. At the time, before I knew about her extracurricular activities with the CEO, I'd said yes, because that's what supportive husbands do. Now I wouldn't miss it for the world. This was going to be the performance of my lifetime, and I was going to nail it like I was auditioning for an Oscar. The 2 weeks leading up to the gala were some of the strangest of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal. I had to come home every night, kiss my cheating wife hello, ask about her day, listen to her gush about Gregory and the gala and how exciting everything was. I had to sleep next to her, eat breakfast with her, maintain the facade of our marriage while Amira and I plotted its spectacular destruction behind the scenes. It was like being an undercover agent in my own life. I'd smile and nod while Harper talked about seating arrangements. Oh, the irony that she and Gregory would be at the head table while I was relegated to table 7 with the accountants, and the whole time I was mentally reviewing the documents in my briefcase. The postnup, the video evidence, the financial records showing every asset we'd accumulated during our marriage. I had it all organized, labeled, ready to go. Amira had prepared 2 identical envelopes, one for Harper and one for Gregory, each containing copies of everything they needed to see to understand exactly how screwed they were. Harper spent the day of the gala at a spa with her girlfriends from work, the same girlfriends who'd shown up at our apartment to witness her affair like it was a Netflix premiere. She came home glowing, nails done, hair professionally styled, carrying a garment bag with her dress. She was so excited she was practically vibrating, talking a mile a minute about who was going to be there and what kind of announcement Gregory might make. I just smiled and told her she looked beautiful, which she did, which somehow made everything worse. I got dressed in my best suit, the navy one I'd bought for my brother's wedding, the one that actually fit properly and made me look like I had my life together instead of like a guy whose world was about to implode. I looked at myself in the mirror and practiced my smile. Calm, confident. Not at all like a man about to commit social murder in front of 100 corporate executives and their spouses. I looked like a guy going to a nice party with his beautiful wife. Perfect. The gala was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, one of those fancy downtown places with marble floors and crystal chandeliers and valet parking that costs more than a decent meal. We pulled up in Harper's car, a leased BMW that we really couldn't afford, but she insisted she needed for her image, and handed the keys to a valet who was probably judging our financial decisions. Harper was radiant, practically floating as we walked through the lobby toward the ballroom. She kept checking her phone, texting with someone. Gregory, Probably coordinating their entrance or whatever it is that people having affairs do at company parties. The ballroom was exactly what you'd expect from a corporate gala trying too hard to be elegant. Round tables with white tablecloths and centerpieces that probably cost more than they should. A stage at the front with a podium and a screen for presentations. A bar in the corner that was already three deep with employees trying to get enough alcohol in their systems to make small talk bearable. A jazz band playing in the corner. Not good jazz, the kind of jazz that exists solely as background noise for people who aren't really listening. Harper immediately spotted her crew, Jennifer from accounting, Marcus from sales, yeah, another Marcus, which had led to some confusing moments at previous company events, and Teresa from HR. They descended on her like seagulls on a French fry, all air kisses and compliments on her dress. I got the obligatory, "Hey Marcus, good to see you," before they basically forgot I existed and went back to talking about work gossip. I didn't care. I grabbed a whiskey from the bar and found a spot where I could observe the room. Gregory made his entrance about 15 minutes later, fashionably late because of course he was. He walked in like he owned the place, which, technically, he kind of did, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly salary. People gravitated toward him immediately, like he had his own magnetic field. Employees wanted FaceTime with the CEO, wanted to be seen talking to him, wanted to laugh at his jokes and nod at his observations. It was like watching courtiers fawn over a king, except the king sold customer relationship management software and wore sneakers to board meetings. I watched as Gregory's eyes scanned the room and landed on Harper. Watched as his face lit up in a way that made me want to throw my drink at him. Watched as he made his way over to her, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. Watched as they greeted each other with a hug that lasted just a fraction of a second too long to be professional. And I watched as absolutely nobody in that room seemed to think this was weird. They all just smiled and nodded like this was totally normal behavior between a CEO and his employee. Around 9 p.m., after dinner had been served, the promised rubber chicken, along with some kind of vegetable medley that tasted like sadness and a dessert that was trying way too hard to be fancy, Gregory took the stage for his speech. He talked about Lexera's accomplishments this year, about their growth and their vision for the future. He talked about the importance of innovation and teamwork and all the other corporate buzzwords that sound meaningful but ultimately mean nothing. And then he started thanking specific employees for their contributions. I especially want to recognize our marketing team, led by the incredible Harper Hale, he said, and the spotlight literally swung to our table. Harper stood up, waving, soaking in the applause like she'd just won an Academy Award. Harper's vision and creativity have been instrumental in positioning Lexera as an industry leader. Her dedication goes above and beyond, and I'm constantly impressed by her commitment to excellence. The room applauded. Harper beamed. Gregory looked at her with that same expression I'd seen in the video footage, that mix of admiration and something significantly less appropriate. And that's when I decided it was time. I stood up. Not dramatically, not making a scene, just calmly rising from my chair at table 7 with the accountants. I raised my glass, still half full of whiskey because I'd been nursing it all night, wanting to be completely sober for this moment. The spotlight operator, probably confused, swung the light partially toward me. People at nearby tables started noticing. The applause died down. Harper looked over at me with this expression of confusion mixed with annoyance, like I was interrupting her moment. Gregory, still on stage, squinted in my direction. And of course Harper's husband Marcus, he said with that patronizing tone that important people use when acknowledging unimportant people. Thank you for supporting Harper's career. She's lucky to have you. I smiled. The same smile I'd been practicing in the mirror, the one that looked friendly and genuine and not at all like the smile of a man about to detonate his entire life. Actually, Gregory, I have a quick announcement to make, if you don't mind. The room went quiet. You could hear the jazz band miss a note. Gregory looked uncertain. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't how these things were supposed to go. But he was trapped. What was he going to do? Tell me no in front of everyone. Sure, Marcus. Go ahead. I walked toward the center of the room, slowly, letting the moment build. I could see Harper's face, confusion turning to concern. I could see her coworkers exchanging glances. I could see Amira at table 12 near the back, sitting with a friend she'd brought as cover, barely containing her grin. I just wanted to say, I started, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. that I know. Harper, I know about you and Gregory. The silence that followed my announcement was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. You know that moment in action movies right before the explosion, where everything goes quiet and you can hear your own heartbeat? It was like that, except instead of a bomb, it was just me standing in the middle of a corporate ballroom full of tech industry people who suddenly realized they were about to witness the most dramatic episode of someone else's life play out in real time. Harper's face went through about 5 different emotions in the span of 2 seconds. Confusion, denial, panic, anger, and finally landing on what I can only describe as, oh shit, he actually knows. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish that had just been pulled out of water and was trying to remember how breathing worked. Gregory, still on stage, had gone completely pale. And I mean pale, like someone had taken an eraser to his spray tan and removed every trace of color. His hand was frozen in mid-gesture, probably still from whatever point he'd been making about quarterly projections or synergistic partnerships or whatever corporate nonsense he'd been spewing. The accountants at my table had all simultaneously leaned back in their chairs, creating physical distance from me like I was radioactive. Smart people, accountants. They knew when to get out of the blast radius. I could see phones coming out around the room, not to call for help, but to record this. Because, of course, this was going to be on someone's Instagram story within minutes. This was going to be the office gossip for the next decade. This was going to be the story people told at bars when someone asked about the craziest thing they'd ever witnessed at a work event. Marcus, Harper said, her voice cracking slightly. She stood up from her table, one hand gripping the edge like it was the only thing keeping her upright. What are you talking about? This isn't the time or place. Oh, I think it's the perfect time and place, I said, my voice steady, calm, conversational. Like we were discussing the weather instead of her infidelity in front of her entire company. You've been sleeping with Gregory. I have video evidence of you two in our apartment. On our couch. The couch I built. Do you remember that couch, Harper? The one that took me 4 hours to assemble because the instructions were in Swedish and 3 of the screws were missing. Someone in the crowd made a sound that was half gasp, half nervous laugh. The jazz band had completely stopped playing now. Even they knew when they were outmatched. There was no background music appropriate for this moment. This required complete, uninterrupted attention. Gregory finally found his voice. Marcus, I think you're confused. Harper and I have a professional relationship. We've been working closely on several important projects, and I think you've misinterpreted. I haven't misinterpreted anything. I cut him off. I have crystal clear, high-definition video of you two making out in my living room. I have footage of you bringing Thai food from Lotus Garden. That's our anniversary restaurant, by the way, and having a romantic dinner while I was in Atlanta for a conference. I have timestamps, Gregory. Dates, times, multiple occasions. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. Jennifer from accounting, one of the co-workers who'd shown up at my apartment during one of their little rendezvous, suddenly looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Good. She should. They all should. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. And before anyone jumps in with their opinions about how I should handle this, I continued, turning to address the room at large. Let me just say that several of you already knew about this. Some of you even participated. You showed up at my apartment with wine and snacks like you were attending a viewing party. You treated my marriage like it was entertainment. I could see heads turning, people looking at each other, trying to figure out who I was talking about. Jennifer had gone pale. Marcus from sales was staring at his plate, like it contained the secrets of the universe. Teresa from HR looked like she was mentally reviewing what parts of this situation could result in a lawsuit. Probably all of it. Teresa, the answer is all of it. In fact, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket, some of you told me I should be mature about this, that I should let them be happy, that Harper and Gregory were soulmates, and I shouldn't stand in the way of true love. I pulled out 2 envelopes, crisp and white, and containing the legal equivalent of a nuclear warhead. So you know what? You're right. I should be happy for them. Harper's eyes locked onto those envelopes like they were venomous snakes. She knew. Somehow, even before I said anything else, she knew that whatever was in those envelopes was going to ruin her life. Call it instinct, call it guilt, call it the universe finally giving her a preview of consequences. Her hand reached out slightly, like she was going to try to stop me, but she was too far away and I was already moving. I walked toward Harper's table first. The crowd parted, because what else were they going to do? Nobody wants to be in the way of a man on a mission, especially when that mission involves public humiliation and legal documentation. I handed the first envelope to Harper. She took it with shaking hands, staring at it like it might explode. Which, metaphorically, it was about to. That's a copy of our post-nuptial agreement, I said pleasantly, like I was handing her a birthday card. The one you signed 3 years ago when I invested $50,000 in your candle company. Remember Emotional Scents? The business that was going to revolutionize home fragrances? The one that failed after 8 months and 12 total sales. Harper's face was now completely drained of color. She remembered. Oh, she remembered. I could see it in her eyes, the moment it all clicked together. The postnup, the adultery clause, the fact that she'd signed away her rights to everything if she ever cheated. That's the thing about signing legal documents. People always focus on the main clauses, the big obvious ones. They skip over the small print. And the small print is where people like me live. I turned and walked toward the stage where Gregory still stood, frozen like a deer in headlights. I climbed the 3 steps up to the stage, which felt symbolic, like I was ascending to some higher plane of petty revenge, and handed him the second envelope. He took it automatically, his CEO autopilot engaging even as his brain was clearly short-circuiting. That's for you, Gregory, I said. It contains copies of the same post-nuptial agreement, video evidence of your affair with my wife, time-stamped and dated, and documentation of all the marital assets that will be transferred to me as a result of Harper's breach of our legal contract. That includes, by the way, the stock options Lexra gave her when she made senior director. Those were acquired during our marriage, which makes them marital property, which means I get half, possibly more, depending on how generous the judge feels. Gregory opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a computer trying to process too much information at once, just buffering endlessly. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Then I remembered him on my couch, drinking my wine, kissing my wife, and the sympathy evaporated faster than water on hot pavement in July. Inside both envelopes, I continued, addressing the room again because, hey, if you're going to blow up your life, you might as well make it a show. You'll also find a notice of my intent to file for divorce on grounds of adultery, contact information for my attorney, who some of you might recognize as Amira Cortez, the Amira Cortez, and a detailed breakdown of how our assets will be divided according to the terms Harper agreed to when she signed that postnup. I pulled out my phone, took a sip of my whiskey for dramatic effect, and smiled. That same calm, practiced smile I'd been perfecting for 2 weeks. The smile that said I wasn't angry, I wasn't hurt, I wasn't broken. I was just a guy following the contract to its logical conclusion. I was just doing my job, really. Compliance. Making sure everyone followed the rules they'd agreed to. Oh, and Harper? I added, turning back to look at her. She was still holding the envelope, still frozen, still looking like her entire world had just collapsed. Which, fair it had. I'm keeping the Netflix password. You can get your own subscription. And with that, I turned to leave. I didn't run. I didn't storm out. I just walked, calm and collected, toward the ballroom exit. I could hear the explosion starting behind me. Voices rising, people shouting questions, Harper's voice cracking as she yelled my name. Marcus! Wait. Please. Her scream echoed through the ballroom, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers and marble floors. It was the sound of someone realizing that actions have consequences, that legal contracts are binding, that you can't just cheat on your husband and expect him to smile and take it. It was the sound of a woman who'd had everything and lost it all in the span of 5 minutes because she couldn't keep her hands off her boss. I didn't turn around. I didn't wait. I just kept walking, past the shocked faces and raised phones, past the jazz band, who'd given up any pretense of playing and were just watching like everyone else, past the hotel staff, who were probably trying to figure out if they should intervene or just let this corporate drama play out naturally. Behind me, I could hear Gregory trying to regain control. Everyone, please, let's just calm down but his voice was drowned out by the chaos. People were talking over each other. Phones were ringing as news spread to people who weren't even at the gala, and somewhere in the background I could hear Harper sobbing. The last thing I heard before I pushed through the ballroom doors was someone, I think it was one of the accountants from my table, saying, "Holy shit, did that just happen?" Yes, my friend. Yes, it did. And it was glorious. The next morning, my phone exploded. Not literally, though with the number of notifications coming through, it felt pretty close. Apparently, when you detonate your marriage at a corporate gala in front of 100 witnesses with phones, word spreads fast. Really fast. Like wildfire meets viral video fast. Gregory was suspended by noon. The board called an emergency meeting, probably after someone showed them the video evidence I'd thoughtfully included in his envelope, and decided that having a CEO who sleeps with employees was what they called a governance issue. Translation: Gregory, pack your shit, we'll call you. HR launched a full investigation into workplace conduct, which was corporate speak for "we're covering our asses before the lawsuits start flying." Harper got the same treatment. Escorted out of the building by security, carrying a cardboard box filled with her desk plants, motivational posters, and expired protein bars she'd been hoarding in her drawer. I heard she cried the whole way to the parking lot. From Jennifer in accounting, who suddenly wanted to grab coffee and check in on me. Funny how that works. Her co-workers, the same ones who told me to be mature and let them be happy, were suddenly sliding into my DMs like I was the last lifeboat on the Titanic. "Hey Marcus, just wanted to see how you're doing." Marcus, I always thought something seemed off about them. I never approved of what was happening, just so you know. Right. Sure you didn't. Divorce court was swift. Amira wasn't kidding when she said this case was gift-wrapped. The judge took one look at the post-nup, the video evidence, and Harper's lawyer's weak attempt at arguing emotional distress, or whatever nonsense they'd cooked up, and ruled in my favor. Everything. The condo fund, $92,000. The joint accounts. The investment portfolios. Half of Harper's Lexera stock options, which was hilarious considering the company's value had tanked after their CEO scandal went public. Harper moved back in with her parents in Ohio. Gregory disappeared from LinkedIn entirely, probably licking his wounds at some tech bro retreat in Bali or whatever disgraced executives do. Lexera hired a new CEO who immediately implemented a strict fraternization policy and rebranded the company as employee-focused. Translation: please don't sue us. As for me, I bought a loft downtown. Furnished it exactly how I wanted. No compromises, no, but what about the aesthetic discussions? I threw a housewarming party with actual friends, the kind who don't pretend to like you for networking opportunities. We ordered pizza, drank beer, played video games until 3 a.m. It was perfect. When Harper called 6 months later, crying, asking if we could talk, I kept it simple. "Sorry, we pivoted. You're no longer part of the business model." Then I hung up and ordered more pizza. Best return on investment ever.